So warm welcome again to everyone who's here in person, everyone who's online. Such a beautiful sight always to see all of us gathered here together for practice. Please do go ahead and mute your mic if you haven't already, except for Claudia, who's interpreting in Spanish. So anybody who needs Spanish interpretation, as I announced earlier, you're welcome to try that out if you want to test your language skills there. And my apologies that we had a breakdown on one computer, so we only have the side view today, but I'll get that one back hopefully today, and then we will get it all set up again next week for that. And couple of announcements. So the next Sangha brunch is happening here after the Sunday Dhamma talk on November 10th. Please RSVP for those just so that we have a sense of how much food to prepare. It's kind of a potluck brunchy type thing, and everyone is welcome. And so that'll be happening starting at 10:30 right after the Dhamma talk. And what else? So there's a Spanish Dharma talk this afternoon with Theravada Sangha from Ciudad de Mexico, and they're at 2 o'clock their time. No, sorry, 2 o'clock East Coast US time at 12 o'clock Ciudad de Mexico time. Yeah. And there's also a class starting in Spanish, Imágenes del Ser, on November 18th. So all of those good things and many more on the website of Dassanaya. Beautiful. So it's our usual Sunday morning program, and that means I'll offer about a 10-minute or so guided meditation, and then we'll shift into a Dhamma talk and allow some time at the end, maybe 15 minutes or so at the end, for any comments, questions, reflections that you might have. So with that, you can go ahead and begin to settle into your meditation posture. Is the sound okay? Okay, great, thank you. So really allowing the body to come into a balanced, upright posture. Bones of the spine coming into alignment. And knowing that the bones are carrying the weight of the body. Perhaps the muscles of the chest and the neck and the shoulders can soften and widen. No need to hold on. And turning the attention to the feeling of the weight of the body on your seat. Really allowing the body to settle right here and right now. And just tuning into the sensations of touch wherever you're sitting or lying down. And then a shift to turn the attention to the sensations of hearing. Just receiving sounds as they come into awareness and noticing the endings of sounds as well. Staying curious about the sensations of hearing moment by moment. shift to thoughts as sensations in the mind. So how is it to receive thoughts just like a sound or a touch as a sensation in the mind, as a sense organ? Staying curious about thoughts as sensations, aware when a thought arises, when it's present, and when it ceases. All right, so that brings us to the end of the meditation for now. And I'm just going to shift a little bit so that I can see everybody at the same time, hopefully. And if you have any questions or reflections on the meditation, we can talk about those after the talk, because the talk is also actually going to be related to that meditation on the sense basis. So beginning as usual with the homage to the Buddha and the triple gem. And if you know it, you're welcome to chant along. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. I want to talk today a little bit about the meaning of happiness, or the role of happiness in our practice on the path of awakening. And something about how we relate to that quality, how we access that quality. Because I think that the opposite of that is what often gets a lot of airtime. So we often hear a lot about suffering or pain or delusion, greed, hatred, many unpleasant qualities of mind. But happiness or joy is absolutely essential on the path, actually. And yet it can be quite elusive, and it can also, the pursuit of happiness can also lead to difficulty. So I want to talk a little bit about it in the context of a sutta called the Salayatana Vibhanga Sutta. So it's the Sala 6. Ayatana is like realm or field, or sometimes it's called basis, although that doesn't really work so well in this case, because it is the sense field. So it's the analysis of the ayatana, the sense fields, the 6 fields of sensory perception. And so those are hearing, seeing, tasting, smelling, touching, the normal ones that we think of in Western culture, as well as thinking, mind as a sense base or a sense organ. And it's interesting because in this sutta, what we see is the Buddha sets out the 6 sense bases as a way of talking about the human experience in general, right? So we're experiencing things through the senses, through the bodily senses, through the mentality as a sense. And then we have some kind of a feeling about it. And he divides these this emotional content. So not feeling tones. We're not talking about Vedana here. We're talking about actual emotions, which are sankharas, if you're tracking in terms of aggregates. He divides up these emotional responses or reactions that we have into 2 types: what he calls the householder type and the renunciate type. And actually, the way that I want to talk about it is a little bit more aligned with what the commentary said. So the commentary said something very interesting, which is this way of thinking about it in terms of renunciate is about insight, is a way of looking at it with insight. So it doesn't necessarily correspond to who's a monastic or who's not. It's a question of the insight that you bring to the path. So there's the mundane way of seeing it, the sort of everyday, not so insightful way of seeing it, and there's the insightful way. And so the Buddha describes these kinds of states. And it's very interesting because he first says, well, first you need to get to know your senses. You need to understand the sense fields, right? So we talk about these ayatana as like in the same way that we would talk about a field of vision, right? even though it says I, it doesn't mean the I, it means the field of vision, which is broad, right? We can see very far sometimes. And so on with each one of the organs that's mentioned. So while he is referring to actual physical organs, he is also referring to the experience or the sort of way that those aspects of body are tuned into the world. So we have an experience. I didn't bring my my funny little prop here today. And then we can study that. We can study how we feel about those experiences that we're having. And he says, so in a mundane kind of way, when we have a pleasant experience and we see that as a gain, we see that as something that we've a win, then that is going to bring suffering. That is ultimately going to be something that isn't probably, that is not a happiness that is lasting. So he acknowledges that there is happiness, though, that can come from getting the things that we want, or having pleasant sensations, or hearing the right kind of music that we like, or whatever that is. And there's nothing intrinsically wrong with that, except that we have this belief that somehow we've gained something, rather than understanding that as a phenomena, as an experience that's happening, and it's an experience that will be here for some time and then it will go. Right? So that's the kind of mundane way of looking at it through any of the senses. So then the insight way of looking at it is that you see the impermanence of the things. You see the impermanence of all the experiences that come through the body and the mind. Whether they're, even if they're pleasant, you see that they have a distinct beginning, presence, and then cessation. And you might ask yourself, so why does that bring happiness? Why is it that it brings happiness to observe the sensation of pleasant things? Right? And so for one thing, it is a tremendous relief to be in a harmony and accord with what's true about our lives. That will bring happiness. Right? It's when we struggle against the things that are true about our lives that we find that it's difficult to find happiness in what's actually going on. So there's that aspect of it. There's the aspect of really accepting and being more in harmony with the nature of change and not trying to resist that. But there's also this aspect of contentment that can come up when we understand this as well, right? That we are not constantly seeking after the next pleasurable thing, because we're able to accept and actually enjoy that cessation. Ah, yes, there it is. It's doing what it must do. So the example of this that I sometimes use is pancakes. So if you are a fan of pancakes and you eat the first pancake, and then the first pancake is gone, and you think, okay, well, another pancake would be great, right? So, okay, then you have that next hit of the next pancake, and then eventually that pancake is gone too, right? And then maybe you think, oh, well, a third pancake, right? More is better. More is better. But then maybe that third pancake isn't quite as comfortable, actually, to eat as the first one. And so on, right? This way in which we we sometimes can have difficulty just accepting the cessation of a particular happiness, right? Like the thing about getting, spending a lot of time on your phone sometimes is like that too, right? On your phone or watching TV, it's like, right, you have this, some good vibe, somebody liked your post or whatever it is, and you're looking for that over and over again. Mm. But eventually there's this feeling of the hollowness of that, like, right, that doesn't fill you up, actually. That actually doesn't take care of the problem. So you start to recognize that there isn't really truly a gain there. That's what the Buddha means when he says it's, if you think that it's a gain, then you have a certain degree of happiness, but that is not the kind that will lead you forward on the path. Or the other side is the experience of a loss. So, you know, sometimes I tell the story of when my daughter was little and I was, her preschool was hosting her birthday party. She was very little at this time, like 3 maybe. I think it was her 3rd birthday. And I thought, okay, great. All the kids will be there. So I took off work at lunchtime and I went to the ice cream shop and I got a little cup of ice cream for each one of the kids in her preschool and a little bag of sprinkles. And I showed up and the preschool teacher already had all the kids at the table. And so Kayla, my daughter Kayla, was at one end, and then at the other, and then there's a long rectangular table and lots of kids sitting on both sides. And then at the other end was this little boy that I call Hugging Buddy. Unfortunately, this many years later, I cannot remember his name, but they loved to hug and they were good friends. And her hugging buddy was sitting at this end of the table. And so I started handing out ice creams, right? Put one ice cream in front of each kid. And then I put one in front of Hugging Buddy, and the preschool teacher took it away. She said, "Oh, no, he can't have one because he's lactose intolerant." And as soon as she took that cup of ice cream away from him, he started crying. He was crying. Little Hugging Buddy. It was very sad, right? Why? Because he thinks that it's a gain to have a cup of ice cream, right? And he's a child, so he doesn't understand that the ice cream is even harmful to him. It's not even a matter of that the thing will be done, right? It's actually harmful to him. So he has this idea that it's a gain to have the ice cream, and yet it's actually a gain to him for it to be taken away. But that makes him sad, right? It makes him sad. And in the same way, the Dharma is telling us over and over again that there are many ways in which we think that we're actually gaining something when we're not. When we're actually attached to something that is actually even harmful to us. So the Buddha says that happiness will arise when we start to see in a penetrating way the impermanence of these phenomena that come through the sense gates. And he says specifically that we see with proper wisdom that all forms and all tastes and all touchables and all visual stimulation and all mental stimulation, both in the past and in the present, are impermanent, are dukkha. So now I'm looking at Bhikkhu Bodhi's translation because he's an excellent, very revered translator. Thank goodness for Bhikkhu Bodhi having done this enormous work to make it accessible to us. And yes, suffering is a word that's used for dukkha, but in this instance, I think that's really not the proper translation for it. So what what dukkha means in this situation is, it means that that the unsatisfactoriness, the unfulfillingness of it, right? The fact that it doesn't fill you up, as we talked about a moment ago. That's actually more to the point of the kind of subtlety of dukkha. Yeah. So we see that they are unsatisfactory or unfulfilling and fleeting. And when you see that, there is a joy that comes based on being able to be in harmony with the truth of impermanence. He says, but then what happens is you might have some sadness that comes in the form of, oh, when will I ever be truly at peace like the great noble ones? When shall I enter upon and abide in that base that the noble ones now enter upon and abide in? So he talks about this kind of longing for, once we have a taste of insight, there can be this kind of longing, like, oh, or maybe there's a form of like self-doubt also that can come up at this point. We see a little bit of something and we think, oh my gosh, I have so much more left to do, or I just will never get there, or something like that, right? I see some people laughing. Yes. Uh-huh. And yet what he says about that kind of unpleasant thought is, he says, just let that motivate you. Let that keep you on the path. Let that be a reminder so that you can go deeper and deeper and deeper into the understanding of impermanence. And ultimately, that thorough, penetrative experience of impermanence brings with it equanimity, what he speaks about as the insight of true equanimity. Right? A kind of harmony that is peaceful. So happiness is very important on the path, and it is something that we can generate ourselves by our understanding and by our insights. And in fact, at Sutta Contemplation, actually, on Friday, we were talking about another sutta in the Anguttara Nikaya. So this is Majjhima Nikaya 137. This is Middle Length Discourse 137. And then we were talking about one in Anguttara Nikaya, in the early ones, like number 22, chapter 1, number 22 through about 28 of the numbered discourses. There's a statement in there where the Buddha says, yes, I do not see even one other thing that brings happiness like a developed mind, a cultivated mind, a developed mind, an insightful mind. But the interesting thing is that that cultivation of the mind happens by tuning into our sense experience. So I want to come all the way back to the simplicity of the practice of coming back to observing what happens with our sense experience and what are the reactions and responses that we have to that are either skillful or unskillful. So the good news is that ultimately Hugging Buddy was happy enough to eat a cookie. And he moved on. He moved on to a different kind of happiness, though. Again, he's a child, and he probably didn't quite get as far as understanding that it's not even the cookie's not a game. But we use everything in our practice as this access to a kind of happiness that isn't dependent on us getting something pleasant or getting what we want. Mhm. And that in itself is a form of freedom, right? If you know clearly that it's not a game to get that thing, it's just an experience, then you cannot be controlled by it. You cannot be controlled by power or food or money or sex or whatever it is that you have that pleasant association with. You have total freedom. So the recommendation here is this beautiful form of knowing how it is that this body and mind are responding to the things that we experience, knowing that we don't need to chase after the pleasant time and time and time again in order to find our true happiness. And that happiness is not permanent either. It might lead us to some kind of longing or some kind of questioning. But eventually, when we see reality with such a penetrative insight, we will find our peace with it. And that is a kind of bliss. It's a beautiful, beautiful kind of bliss, all of its own. In fact, I think about Venerable Sariputta. Sariputta was one of the Buddha's key students who went on to be a great teacher in his own right. And he used to talk about bliss. Oh, what bliss! And then, but folks would say, but no, isn't it like if we let go of all things and we experience nibbana? So what bliss could there be? And he says, but that is bliss. That is the bliss. That freedom. Right there. In letting it be as it is, in knowing that we are in fact already living in harmony with the way that it is. It's just up to us to observe it and accept that. So get to know this body and mind. Get to know this body and mind, and know that we don't have to struggle to make it right in some way or to make it pleasant in some way. The closest intention is the one that is the intention to be in harmony with the way things actually are. That's the most joyful intention. So let that be your guide. Thank you. That's what I wanted to share today. All right. right, so we have a little bit less than 15 minutes or so for questions or comments or reflections, concerns.
I'm not sure if I have a question, but I would like to compliment you on your talk, because it zeroed in very much for me. I'm familiar with what you talked about, so it's not, it isn't new. But I really appreciate the way your perspective. You like that word? Your way of presenting it, and I did have a thought, however, and I was thinking I'm going to research Bhikkhu Bodhi. I've seen his name so many times, and I've seen some of what he's done, and he I think I met him one time. I'm not sure, but thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. Yes, so I'm glad to hear that it sounded fresh. It's always interesting to see how we can experience a Dhamma, we can hear a Dhamma that we've heard before, perhaps many, many, many times, perhaps even decades later, and find a new perspective on it or a new access to it. And yes, Bhikkhu Bodhi, he's wonderful teacher and translator. He lives up in Carmel, New York, at a monastery called Chuanyen, which is, he's a Theravada monk, but he actually lives at a Chan monastery, actually, for many years. And yeah, he started doing translations. He made practice for decades in Sri Lanka, actually. And while he was in Sri Lanka, he started working with the Pali Text Society and doing translations from Pali, which is the ancient Indian Prakrit language in which many of the Theravada suttas are captured. And so he started doing translations from Pali to English.
Hello, Aya.
Hi.
I really liked your idea of opening up the understanding of dukkha a little more. It really sort of hit home, because of course, usually translated as suffering, we get dis/ease a lot, or unsatisfactoriness, but the unfulfillment, that is really, or even imbalance is a way it can be talked of also, but unfulfillment is really, I've never heard that in that sense. And it really opened it up for me to really think of a wider field of dukkha. Something, it's not fulfilling me. It's something I think is going to make me as a person whole, to stabilize me, to make me whole. And it's to fill some emptiness. I think this is what
Yes.
I think no, that unfulfillment is really, I think that's really a powerful move to think of dukkha with that way also. So thank you.
Great. You're welcome. Yeah. It came to me last night, actually. So I was just thinking about
It's
how
perfect.
I wanted to
It's very good to add to the list.
This. It is.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because not everything is that blatant suffering,
Right.
pain. It's just this like deep sense we have that something will make us whole. If we can hold on to it. So,
yes.
And, yeah.
And the contrast with that, and the contrast with insight, which sees that we are already whole in the sense of complete, right? We are a complete phenomena in every single instant, as it must be, based on the causes and conditions, based on the karma, based on, right, the physical world. We are totally complete, and yet there is this other side, right? This other belief, this other non-fulfillment that we feel. Claudia, te voy a quitar como intérprete para que puedas hacer una pregunta. Permítame un segundito porque tengo que conseguirte aquí en... oh no, espérate. Ahora no veo cómo cancelar eso. Aquí. Ok, ahora sí. Dígame, por favor.
Yeah, thank you, Aya.
Yes.
So, yeah, I was thinking about that, and I've been thinking lately about relationships, all types, and what they actually do in your hormones, like hormonally. You know, you get in touch with somebody, and then you have dopamine and serotonin and oxytocin and all these hormones, and I was thinking, and you know, it kind of it confuses you because it seems like we really depend on each other for that. It seems, you know, and it's very strong. It's like even it happens without you knowing, you know. It really does. So how do you do to like provide yourself with that states or
Yes.
not? I don't know. It gets very confusing.
No, it's a really good question and reflection, Claudia. And I don't want to imply somehow that, you know, we don't benefit from our contact with other people, because I think that that's also an important part of the path, right? That the Buddha, and, you know, in general, just the, I myself have received so much benefit from being in contact with people on the path. And so I don't want to imply that there's anything wrong with that, but I do want to say that my experiences and what I think the sort of promise of meditation, and the reason why meditation has become such a central part of Buddhism as it's arising here in the United States and in other parts of the Western world, is because you can learn how to meditate in a way that brings all of those hormones up by itself. Like, will tell you, you know, sitting out in a freezing cold cabin in the woods in Northern California, you know, with not a person around, in silence for weeks at a time, you know, and there's no shortage. There's absolutely like joy blasting my head off, you know, kind of thing. So, and that's why the Brahma Viharas was the first practice, right? That the Buddha recommended to so many people, because he wanted people to learn how to start to meditate on joyful states, beautiful, joyful qualities, and just be able to bring that up. And then you feel it in your body, right? You know this, you start to feel it in your body starts to respond, and there's that, in a positive sense, because it can also happen in a negative sense, but definitely in a positive sense, there can be this beautiful feedback loop, right, between mind and body that is helping you in the meditation. But the thing about that is, right, that, and this is, at least again, in my experience, is so helpful to have a teacher, because it's helpful to have somebody who can work with you on what are the kinds of meditations that are appropriate to your particular karmic circumstances in the moment, because it's not all the same for everybody. There is not a one size fits all. And even over time, one person, you know, myself, my practice has changed over time, and I find that it's beautiful to have lots of different ways to meditate, to respond to what's going on for me and find those beautiful physical states. Is that helpful?
Yes, thank you, Aya.
Okay. Todd, I see you have your hand up again, but I just want to check if there's anybody else who hasn't had a chance to speak. No? Okay. Just briefly. Oh, there you go.
I can't, the Pali word doesn't come to mind, but it's, the Buddha in the Pali text talks about a change of lineage away from our social milieu we're in now to more of a child of the Buddha into the Sangha. So just commenting on the social relational aspect, we can sort of move that relation into our spiritual community, because I have lots of trouble with my biological family right now. There's a lot of relational problems, unwholesome things happening, and it's helpful, I think, to find a spiritual community. I think that was talking about with change of lineage that can help that to make new relationships. So that's it.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, I'm not sure which polyword you're talking about there, but it's all right.
I can find it later.
Okay. All right, so I think we've come to nearly our closing time. Dana, do you have an announcement for the group?
Yes. The practice of giving and receiving has been part of Buddhism since its inception. Giving to Dassanaya Buddhist Community supports our guiding teacher, Dhammadipa, the physical location at the vihara, and allows us to continue to offer Buddhist teachings in support of the awakening of all beings. Our support pages are on the website under the support tab. Donate, volunteer, or offer material supports. In addition, about once a month, we send an email communication about meditation, classes, and retreat schedules. You can subscribe on the homepage. Thank you so much for the talk and the reflections today.
Thank you, Dana. Yes, so it's our autumn fundraiser time, and Dana's helping to remind us about that. Thank you. And thank you to everyone who has been a support to the community with their material and financial and practice and presence and volunteer service in so many ways. It's wonderful. Thank you so much. We can't do it without you. So I wanted to dedicate the merits of our practice today to benefit all beings, known and unknown, seen and unseen, in all the realms. May all beings be free from mental suffering. May all beings be free from physical suffering. May beings realize absolute peace and compassion in their hearts and minds. May we find our own liberation by the power of the Buddhas, the Dhamma, the Sangha, and each one's efforts. May all beings be free. All right, everybody. So wonderful to see you.